Hello and welcome to another Magic Duels gameplay. Today we're taking a look at a red-black aggressive artifact-based deck featuring a lot of the cards from Kaladesh. So let's take a look at the entire deck, starting out with Inventor's Apprentice, single red for a 1-2 that gets +1/+1 as long as we control an artifact. So a 2-3 for single red is quite powerful. We also have Bomat Courier, which is an artifact that does a lot of neat things for the deck. It has haste, so it can get in there for 1 damage the turn you play it, and then also exiles the top card of your library face down whenever it attacks. And then at some point later in the game you can pay a single red, discard your hand and sacrifice a courier to put all those exiled cards into your hand. So this is also a way to enable madness cards when you discard your hand, and can also refill your hand later in the game once you've emptied your hand to maybe draw into some more action. So a very neat card with lots of neat little synergies as well. We also have a Lightning Axe, a nice removal spell that also enables some of our madness cards, since we have to discard a card from our hand as an additional cost or pay 5 generic mana to deal 5 damage to a creature at instant speed. Then we have Syndicate Trafficker. This is probably one of the weaker cards in the deck, but still decent. For 1 and a black we get a 3-1 that can sacrifice an artifact for 1 mana to put a +1/+1 counter on it and make it indestructible until end of turn, so this can maybe help you play around sweeper effects. Then we also have Heir of Falkenrath, which is a vampire. Doesn't really have any synergies with the artifact part of the deck, but does work well with all the madness cards in the deck, since it's a free discard outlet, and then becomes a 3/2 flyer when we do discard a card, so also just a nice aggressive card. We have Scrapheap Scrounger, which is a 3/2 that cannot block, but we're gonna be attacking with the Scrapheap Scrounger anyways, and then can also come back from the graveyard if we exile a creature from it, and of course an artifact to enable some of our artifact synergies. Then of course Smuggler's Copter, the best card in the deck, and works very well with madness as well, since we can discard cards and then cast them for their madness cost. We can even crew it with a Bomat Courier if the courier can no longer make any profitable attacks, and yeah, just a great card in general. We also have Key to the City, yet another way to enable madness cards, since we can discard a card and then make a creature unblockable until end of turn, so a nice way to deal those last points of damage. And then when we untap the key we can also pay 2 generic mana to draw an extra card, so in the late game we can get rid of extra lands and hopefully draw into some more action. Then we have Pia Nalaar, which comes with a flying Thopter token, and also can bump up some of our artifact creatures or prevent a creature from blocking if we sacrifice an artifact. And also just a 2/2, so it does a lot of neat things. And we also have Thopter Engineer, which also makes a flying Thopter token and gives all artifact creatures we control haste. Most artifact creatures in the deck already have haste, but she can help give some of our Thopter tokens haste. Maybe if we play a Smuggler's Copter later in the game we can attack with it right away. So certainly does some useful things, but also has some diminishing returns, so I don't think we want a 3rd copy, because the 3-drop salt is already pretty full. Then we have Fiery Temper, great removal spell and burn spell, and also has a madness with all those madness enablers that I already mentioned. Then we have Unlicensed Disintegration, which is one of the reasons to play this deck, since it's such a powerful card, destroying a creature and then dealing 3 damage to that creature's controller if we control an artifact, so just a great card. We also have Pia Kiran Nalaar, making 2 Thopter tokens, can also sacrifice artifacts to deal 2 damage to something, and works well after you maybe play a Thopter Engineer on turn 3, giving your Thopters haste right away is quite powerful. We also have a Bloodhall Priest, which has madness, and when she enters the battlefield and attacks, we can deal 2 damage to a creature or player if we're empty-handed, and also does some cool things with Bomat Couriers, for example, since you can discard your hand to the Bomat Courier, play the Priest, and then also deal 2 damage to something. Then we have Fleetwheel Cruiser, which can deal a lot of damage on an empty board, since it has 5 power with haste and trample, and becomes a creature right away when you play it, so don't even have to crew it the first turn, and then later in the game you can crew it for 2. And then finally we also have Chandra, Torch of Defiance, which can be used as a removal spell and can also provide some card advantage or just deal 2 damage to the opponent every turn. And then our mana base, 5 swamps, 10 mountains, 2 Smoldering Marsh, 2 Dragonskull Summit, and we also play the full 4 Cinder Barrens to make sure we can cast all our spells on time, since we don't really have a ton of 1-drops, so we can afford to play a tap land like Cinder Barrens. So that's the deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which I don't think is very good. We have 2 tap lands basically, only 1 Bomat Courier for early pressure, then a Trafficker, and yeah, this hand just feels a little too lackluster. And this hand's a lot better. Alright. So we can go, I think, turn 1 Apprentice, turn 2 Courier plus Apprentice. Usually when I have both Apprentice and Bomat Courier in my hand, I prefer running out the Apprentice first to be able to deal more damage. But there are situations where you maybe want the extra card off of the Bomat Courier. But here I think it's turn 1 Apprentice and then turn 2 Courier plus Apprentice. And go from there. Can always maybe discard a Scrounger to a Lightning Axe if we really have to, since we might be able to get it back. Alright, Sylvan Advocate is a little unfortunate, since that's a pretty big roadblock. So let's see if we're forced to use our Lightning Axe. I actually don't mind using Lightning Axe, discarding a swamp, and then play Bomat Courier and attack. Could also play it a little slower, maybe just play a Scrapheap Scrounger here, which would be able to attack into the Sylvan Advocate, but I think this puts the most pressure on opponent, and if they maybe do not have any other cheap creatures to get in the way, we can maybe run away with the game, since the Sylvan Advocate is gonna do a pretty good job of otherwise blocking all our apprentices. So yeah, let's go with the aggressive line here. Discard a swamp. And then play out the Bomat Courier, so we get a card exiled and bump up the Apprentice. And then next turn we can go Apprentice plus Scrapheap. And by that point our hand will be pretty empty, so we can maybe refuel with a Bomat Courier. Alright, our opponent with a Fragmentize on our Bomat Courier. That's a pretty aggressive use of the card. But they do not have another creature, so that bodes well, and we drew another Bomat Courier. So here we have the option of going Courier plus Scrapheap. We could also go Scrapheap plus Apprentice, or could go Apprentice plus Bomat. I think we have to play the Scrapheap Scrounger here no matter what. And then the question is, do we want to run out the Courier now or the Apprentice? And I think given that our hand is almost empty, I prefer getting the extra card from the Bomat Courier, even if that means not getting the Apprentice out. And this also ensures that we have 2 artifacts for the Apprentice in case our opponent somehow has another removal spell. So let's play out Bomat Courier. And I think I'll main phase the second artifact here, just in case our opponent has a way to mess with our Bomat Courier. Alright, opponent takes 3. Anguished Unmaking, probably gonna hit our Scrapheap Scrounger, so it gets exiled, so we can't get it back from the graveyard, but it did cost our opponent 3 life. Alright, don't hate this. So it's unfortunate that we only have access to 2 red, otherwise we could play the Apprentice, sacrifice a Bomat Courier and discard Fiery Temper to deal 3 damage to our opponent. but I think we do play out the other Apprentice here, since I don't think our opponent has something like Languish here that we need to play around. Otherwise they wouldn't be so keen on using those removal spells. But yeah, we can just say go here. And if our opponent does want to kill our courier, we can consider sacrificing it. Declaration in Stone is gonna hit, interesting, the Bomat Courier instead of the 2 Apprentices. But here actually don't think we want to sacrifice a courier, otherwise we lose our only artifact and the Apprentices will become 1/2s again. And Fiery Temper dealing 3 when our opponent's at 8 is actually quite valuable. And I don't think we sacrifice this clue end of turn, because we want to have the artifact in play. Alright, another Apprentice, so let's get in for 4 damage. And then... do we play out the other Apprentice? I think we do. Even though a second Declaration in Stone could be quite awkward. But our opponents had enough. So yeah, I think we do play out the other Apprentice. And see what happens. I guess if our opponent does have another Declaration in Stone, we can just draw a whole bunch of cards and we'll probably find a burn spell. Still don't see a reason to sack the clue end of turn. Unlicensed Disintegration is also good insurance, but we can just finish the game off with our creatures, no need to do anything. Alright, sweet, on to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which only has 2 lands and a pretty high curve. So I don't actually love this hand, but I think it's got powerful enough cards that I think I should keep. And here I think I will play out the turn 1 Apprentice and then turn 2 play a tapped Smoldering Marsh, since we don't have any 2-drops currently. And at least we get in for 1 damage. And we might always draw into another basic, so that Marsh comes into play untapped. Alright, so we might be up against a blue-black control deck. Another 3-drop, so we really need to find a land next turn. But if we do, I don't hate our chances, since we can go Thopter Engineer into maybe Pia Nalaar. Alright, sweet. So we get to play the Thopter Engineer here, so we can attack right away with our Thopter, and then future Thopters will also be able to attack right away. Apprentice gets +1/+1. Alright, so don't hate our chances. We do need to keep sweepers in mind, like a Languish, because this Cruiser, for example, isn't gonna do a whole lot if we don't have any creatures to crew it. So our opponent could be using one of their removal spells here. Could have a Grasp of Darkness, they could have a Murder, could also be holding up a counter spell. But I think here we don't want to play out the Pia main phase, because if our opponent does have the Language, they can just let it resolve and then next turn kill all our creatures. And if they do have a counter spell, I would prefer them not to counter the Pia. So let's just attack and see what happens. Essence Extraction, interesting. So they're gonna try and take out the Inventor's Apprentice and gain 3 life. That's fine. And then post-combat, I think I run out the Heir of Falkenrath. Over the Pia we can still end of turn Fiery Temper our opponent to transform it. And I think Pia is a better follow-up to a potential sweeper than Heir. So let's go with the Heir. So land number 4 for the opponent, but they don't have a sweeper, it looks like. So I think I do transform here, since I don't think our opponent's going to present any creatures where we do need to use a Fiery Temper on. So might as well use our mana efficiently. Alright, so Bloodhall Priest, that's unfortunate. Could have madnessed that out with the Heir of Falkenrath. So here, I feel like if we play the Pia, it's probably going to get countered by the opponent. So I think we just want to attack first and see what happens. Maybe the opponent uses a spot removal spell, and then we can resolve the Pia Nalaar. Otherwise, I'm pretty happy dealing 5 every turn. Opponent might also have a draw spell they want to resolve end of turn to maybe find a sweeper. But we do still have Unlicensed Disintegration up, so if your opponent somehow does play a creature, we can get them pretty good. Yeah, I think we just say go here. And opponent did nothing end of turn, so they don't have any instant speed draw spells, which bodes well for us. They resolve a Jace, which can bounce a creature. They're gonna bounce the Heir of Falkenrath, that's fine. Can't really use a Unlicensed Disintegration, unfortunately. Bomat Courier is actually not bad, so we can replay the Heir of Falkenrath plus play Bomat Courier. And then next turn we can set up the Bloodhall Priest. And I think we do take out the Jace here. Even though our opponent is pretty low, I don't want to give them another activation. So let's play the Courier. Attack for 3. And then replay the Heir of Falkenrath, since at this point it's pretty clear that our opponent doesn't have a sweeper. And even if they do, we have some good follow-ups, especially if we draw land. Six lands for the opponent. They could have the Torrential Gearhulk here, which could also cast the Essence Extraction, but if they do, we still have the Unlicensed Disintegration that can kill the Gearhulk before it can block, so I think we just attack here and then see what happens. And I don't think we want to transform the Heir of Falkenrath yet. Can do that end of turn. We do miss out on 1 point of damage, but I think playing around what the opponent has is more important. Alright, they do have the Torrential Gearhulk. So they are going to be able to cast the Essence Extraction here, which is pretty good for them. But luckily we do have the Unlicensed Disintegration. Interesting, so their opponent chooses to go for the Heir of Falkenrath. So we do miss out on the opportunity to madness out the Bloodhall Priest, but I think getting rid of the blocker and dealing 3 to our opponent is important enough here. And then play a Cinder Barrens, so next turn we have access to 4 mana for the Fleetwheel Cruiser. Could also sacrifice Bomat Courier, madness out Bloodhall Priest. At this point it's quite probable that the opponent has a bunch of counterspells in hand that they didn't have the opportunity to cast yet, since we never really gave them the opportunity to use a counterspell. So I don't think we want to tap out for the Fleetwheel Cruiser here. Instead I think I like main phase 2, play Pia, or play a land and then end step use the Bloodhall Priest with the Bomat Courier, which can also deal 2 damage to the opponent. So I think we definitely want to play out our land here. And then we just attack and see what happens. Opponent has Glimmer of Genius in response. And they might want to use a removal spell here. And they want to kill the Bomat Courier, and now they're tapped out, so they can't resolve a counterspell if they had one. So now we have the option to Madness out the Priest, deal 2 to our opponent, and get the cards from underneath the Bomat Courier. Or we can, second main phase, just play out one of these 2 cards. I think our hand is good enough that we can just let this happen. And our opponent also wisely did it in response to the Bomat Courier trigger. So now second main phase we have the option of Bloodhall Priest or Pia. I think we want to go with the Bloodhall Priest here over the Pia. And then say go. Seems a bit more mana efficient. Alright, looks like we got there. So let's find out if our opponent does have a counterspell here by playing the Fleetwheel Cruiser. There we go. Now we give the opponent the opportunity to awaken the Scatter to the Winds. But I just wanted to prove a point, and I guess our opponent is forced to chum block here anyways, so it's not the end of the world. Opponent's at 2. So hopefully they don't top deck a Languish, that would be awkward. Alright, I guess we might as well see if they have another counterspell. Alright, just the one. Attack with everyone. And then deal 2 to our opponent with the Bloodhall Priest trigger, and there we go, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at what we're working with. Yeah, this looks acceptable. Not the most aggressive hand, and if your opponent deals with a Scrap Heap, these unlicensed disintegrations get a lot worse. But still a decent curve, and Smoldering Marsh is a welcome addition. And I think we play that first, just in case our opponent somehow has a Thalia in their deck, but I doubt it after they play Highland Lake. Could have also played Mountain just to bluff having one of those 2 damage burn spells. Opponent with a Thermal Alchemist, so it looks like a blue-red spells deck. Bomat Courier is a turn late. So here we have the option of Scrap Heap or Trafficker. I don't think we want to play the Heir of Falkenrath here. Scrap Heap has the advantage of turning on the unlicensed disintegrations. But if your opponent is on a blue-red spells deck, they probably have lots of removal spells that they are pretty happy to use on our creatures. So maybe baiting a removal spell first with the Syndicate Trafficker might be better. I think I still want to go with a Trafficker here, even though I could see a scenario where we can sacrifice maybe a Bomat Courier to make it indestructible. I think it's better to try to save the Scrap Heap, even though we can return it from the graveyard. But it can still attack into the Thermal Alchemist. Alright, Thing in the Ice complicates things a little bit. And yeah, we're probably gonna see a Galvanic Bombardment, so Trafficker down. And our opponent has a pretty good board state going here. Thing in the Ice and Thermal Alchemist. But we do have 2 unlicensed disintegrations for them. So let's see what we draw. Inventor's Apprentice. Alright, so I don't hate this. We can go Inventor's Apprentice plus Scrapheap Scrounger. And then if we draw a land next turn, even if they kill the Scrounger, we could still go Bomat Courier plus Unlicensed Disintegration. Yeah, I think we do that. I want to try and save the courier so we can maybe play it in the same turn as a disintegration, and if our opponent wants to kill the Scrounger, we can get it back by getting rid of the creature in our graveyard. So this looks fine. End of turn, Thermal Alchemist puts us to 18. Just need to make sure that we can use the Unlicensed Disintegration on the thing in the eyes before it transforms. Opponent with a Telling Time. Thing in the eyes down to 2 counters. So hopefully if they do have a way to deal with the Scrounger, we can draw into a land so we can go Courier plus Disintegration. Otherwise we miss out on the 3 damage. Alright, looks like no 1-mana removal spell for the opponent. So this is an interesting spot. I mean, the opponent could technically still have a 1-mana removal spell, but we want to use the Disintegration before blockers are declared, otherwise the opponent can just block our Scrapheap Scrounger with the thing in the eyes. So I think we just fire off the Disintegration and see what happens, and hope, I guess, our opponent doesn't have a way to deal with the Scrapheap. Alright, that works. Now we get to attack, and might as well also attack with the Apprentice just in case. Don't see a real downside. Alright, so we're in a decent spot here. Opponent with just a Thermal Alchemist. But they might have a more expensive way to deal with our Scrapheap Scrounger here. We have Heir of Falkenrath plus Fiery Temper to kill the Thermal Alchemist here. Would be nice to have an artifact in play after the Scrapheap dies to still have the bonus on the Inventor's Apprentice, but I don't think we have a good way to make that happen. So I think we do play out the Heir of Falkenrath main phase here, since I do want to get this Thermal Alchemist off the table as soon as possible. Could also just go Inventor's Apprentice plus Bomat Courier. Then we still have the Courier for the Apprentice, but then our opponent just blocks the Apprentice with the Thermal Alchemist. So that's no good. So yeah, let's play the Heir of Falkenrath. And then Madness out the Fiery Temper. And see if our opponent has a response to that, besides pinging us for 1. Unsubstantiate, interesting. We're just going to bounce the Scrapheap Scrounger. I guess that works. So they ping us for 1 once again. But now the Thermal Alchemist is gone. Heir of Falkenrath transforms and we can still attack for 1. And then next turn we have the option of going Scrapheap plus Bomat Courier or Scrapheap plus Inventor's Apprentice. So now we're in a position that I don't mind, which is our opponent has to use their burn spells to kill off our creatures, but we probably have more creatures than the opponent has burn spells. And the opponent's main game plan was to burn us out, but they no longer have a constant source of damage with Thermal Alchemist. So if we can keep this up, we should be able to just outgrind our opponent with cards like Scrapheap Scrounger. And if they do eventually find another Thermal Alchemist, we have plenty of answers. So here I think I do like running out the Bomat Courier over the Apprentice. Yeah, getting that extra card seems valuable. Alright, Looks like the opponent is giving up. Might have some expensive cards in hand that they can't cast. Another thing in the ice is gonna meet unlicensed disintegration. And a land is actually nice, so we can also play the Inventor's Apprentice. And attack for 6. Get another card with the Bomat Courier. And their opponent is almost dead. Just goes to show how much unlicensed disintegration can do. Getting rid of a blocker and dealing 3 damage. Alright, Smuggler's Copters is nice. Let's attack with everyone. And I guess, just out of curiosity, we can sacrifice the Piñata. Alright, we've gotten a Bloodhall Priest and a Copter. On to the next one. Alright, let's take a look at our opener, which looks pretty decent. So let's keep. Opponent has a turn 1 Insolent Neonate, which could block our Bomat Courier here, but I think we still played out and offered a trade. And then next turn we can play Heir of Falkenrath into Thopter Engineer most likely. Opponent instead takes 1, so they might want to activate the Insolent Neonate, or maybe they're a vampire deck and the 1/1 vampire is important to them. Alright, Giant Spectacle, so our opponent could be on a mono red deck with lots of auras and tries to go all in on one creature, in this case Insolent Neonate. It's not going to work out very well for them since we have the 2 removal spells. So our opponent is soon going to face the harsh truth of playing with auras. So we do take 3 here. And Smuggler's Copter is interesting. So I think playing the Copter here is fine. And next turn we also still have the option of going Air plus Madness out Fiery Temper. And now if our opponent does have a way to deal with Bomat Courier, we still have an artifact left for the disintegration. If our opponent also has an enchantment to make the creature above 3 toughness, and it's also just difficult to resist turn 2 Copter. Opponent with a Looming Spires to give the creature +1/+1 on first strike, and also adds a Majoring Bully to the board. Hits us for 4. So here I think we want to play the Heir of Falkenrath. And then we have to decide if we want to Madness out the Fiery Temper with the Smuggler's Copter, or if we want to Madness it out with the Heir of Falkenrath. Could also play defense here, but against Majoring Bully that usually doesn't really work out. So I think we do crew here. Attack. And I think we take out the Neonate here. Alright, Inventor's Apprentice is an interesting twist. So let's see. If we target the Neonate, our opponent does get to sacrifice it to still draw a card. Actually, I think we do take out the Bully here, since This might incentivize our opponent into putting another aura on the neonate, in which case we still have the disintegration. If we do target the neonate with disintegration and our opponent sacrifices it, then we do miss out on the 3 damage from the disintegration. But I think that's still fine if our opponent does put another enchantment on their creature. So now we could go Apprentice plus Bomat Courier, or we can just play the Heir of Falkenrath. This seems to be a little better. We can still potentially double block the neonate, even though that's probably not going to work out very well for us. Muck in the Slide Runner. And Infectious Bloodlust. Let's see what it targets. Targets the Slide Runner. But now our opponent is empty-handed almost. And we can just double block the neonate. Our opponent only gets to kill the Apprentice. And I guess we take 4. But then we have the disintegration for the Slide Runner. Opponent can't sacrifice that, so they do take 3. And I think we're in a decent position. So let's see if our opponent sacrifices the neonate or wants to take out the Apprentice. So if we do kill the Slide Runner, the opponent does get another Bloodlust, but we can wait until combat to use the disintegration so our opponent can't give another creature haste. So definitely want to use disintegration here, so we can only attack with 1 courier. So I think we keep attacking with the one that already has the card exiled under it. So we can crew here. And attack for 4. Apprentice is a decent draw since we can also play that and keep up disintegration. So I think at this point we can discard the Heir of Falkenrath, since I think the Engineer is going to be more relevant. So now we get to go Apprentice and say go. And wait until combat to use the disintegration. If this were a Fiery Temper, we would have the risk of our opponent using pump spells to make sure their creature still survives the 3 damage. But with disintegration and our opponent being mono-red, there's no way we can get punished. Plus we could theoretically just block with the Inventor's Apprentice. Call of the Full Moon. On their Insolent Neonate, I think that's fine. Doesn't give it haste. Opponent does attack because it has to. Let's see, can we actually kill our opponent here if we just kill the neonate? We would miss the 3 damage though if our opponent sacrifices it. So I don't think we get there, so let's just take care of the Slide Runner. Opponent does get another copy of Infectious Bloodlust. Call of the Full Moon will fall off. Because the opponent played 2 creatures themselves, so they played a neonate plus a Call of the Full Moon, so they probably shouldn't have done that. Here we can play Thopter Engineer. And I think we play out tapped Cinder Barrens in case our opponent blocks the Courier and we want to sacrifice it. Let's see, is there a way we can still lose? I don't think so. If we attack with everyone, opponent has +2 damage with the Infectious Bloodlust, and the most they can draw is a 4 damage burn spell, and we're at 9, so send in everyone. Alright, that's quite nice. So if we just point this at our opponent, they go to 5 and they take at least 5 damage. I guess the opponent can still block and sacrifice the neonates, and if they are also playing with Fiery Temper, they could maybe top deck that to take out Copter, but Alright, sweet, I want to thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this gameplay, and as always, have a nice day.